My husband's sick day. He was actually at her place. Do you ever get that feeling in the pit of your stomach? The one that nags at you, even when everything seems perfectly normal? The kind of feeling where your mind races ahead, making up stories you desperately hope aren't true? I used to think I was just paranoid, or maybe a little too sensitive for my own good. But I'm here to tell you, sometimes your instincts are the only thing keeping you from living a lie. Would you believe me if I told you that my husband's sick day was the best and worst thing that ever happened to me? That one ordinary Thursday morning, the kind where you barely notice the clouds rolling in, ended up unraveling every assumption I'd ever made about my marriage. Stay with me. By the end, you'll understand how one day, one tiny deviation from our perfect routine, forced me to see the truth I'd been avoiding for years. It started like any other morning in our little slice of suburbia here in Plano, Texas. If you don't know Plano, picture manicured lawns, SUVs crowding driveways, and neighbors who give you that friendly wave even if they barely know you. Our house sits on Maple Avenue, just 2 blocks from Maple Elementary, close enough that I can hear the morning bell if I open the windows. I woke up to the familiar sound of rain tapping against the window. The Texas sky was heavy and gray, threatening more downpour. I could smell the faint aroma of coffee drifting up from the kitchen, where I'd set the timer the night before. I always do that. Little things to make life easier, to keep our routine running smooth. I padded down the hallway in slippers, careful not to wake the kids, and glanced in on them. Madison, our 10-year-old, was curled up with her stuffed tiger, and Ethan, who's 7, had somehow managed to wrap himself like a burrito in his blanket. For a second, I just stood there, watching them breathe, feeling grateful for the ordinary. Downstairs, the dishwasher hummed, and the kitchen lights cast a warm glow on the granite countertops. I started making lunches, PB&Js for the kids, apple slices, and the little notes I always sneak into their lunchboxes. "You're braver than you think," I wrote on Madison's today. I don't know why, but I felt like she might need it. Maybe I was projecting, because the truth is, I needed it too. Brian wasn't downstairs yet. That was unusual. He's always the first one up, usually already halfway through his first cup of coffee and scanning emails on his iPad. But this morning, his side of the bed was empty when I woke. I found him in the guest room, the covers pulled up to his chin, eyes half closed. He looked off. Not sick exactly, but pale and distracted. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, perching on the edge of the bed. He gave me a weak smile. "I think I'm coming down with something. Fever, chills, a bit of a headache." His voice was rough but somehow forced, as if he was trying to sound sicker than he was. "I'll work from home. Just need to rest a bit. Don't want to get you or the kids sick." I remember pausing, my hand still on his shoulder. There was something odd about the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Do you want some tea? Or I can make you those scrambled eggs you like." He shook his head. "Just let me sleep. Maybe some soup later, but I'll grab it myself." "You've got enough on your plate." That was Brian, always thinking of me, or so I thought. I didn't question it. I kissed his forehead. He didn't feel hot, and went on with my morning. I loaded up the kids in our Chevy Suburban, rain splashing on the driveway as I buckled Ethan into his booster seat. Madison chattered about her upcoming science fair, and I forced myself to listen, to be present, even as my mind circled back to Brian. Was he really sick? Or just burned out from work? The drop-off at Maple Elementary was the usual chaos. Moms in yoga pants juggling umbrellas, kids darting between puddles, the crossing guard waving like she was directing traffic on I-35. I exchanged a quick hello with my friend Heather. Her son, Lucas, is in Madison's class. Heather's the kind of friend who always notices when you're not quite yourself, and she caught my eye with a little half-smile. "You surviving this weather?" she called. "Barely," I joked, but my laugh felt thin. After the kids were inside, I swung by Starbucks, ordered my usual grande vanilla latte, and sat in the drive-thru line watching the windshield wipers swipe away the rain. I scrolled through my texts, school group chat arguing about the next PTA fundraiser, Reminders from the community HOA about trash bins left on the street. Heather sending a meme about surviving another Thursday. Nothing out of the ordinary. Everything perfectly normal. Back home, the rain was still steady, and I sank into the comfort of our routine. I tidied up the living room, wiped tiny fingerprints from the stainless steel fridge, and started a load of laundry. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every creak and groan. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the low rumble of a delivery truck on Maple Avenue, the distant whistle of a freight train. I checked on Brian once or twice. He stayed in the guest room, door closed, supposedly asleep. I left some Tylenol and a bottle of water on the hall table just in case. He'd texted me once, "Don't worry, just need to sleep it off. Love you." I stared at the message for longer than I care to admit, trying to figure out why it bothered me. Brian never used to say, "Don't worry." He always wanted me to worry, wanted to be fussed over, wanted my attention. But today, he wanted distance. I pushed the thought aside. Maybe I was reading too much into it. The last thing I wanted was to be that wife, clingy, insecure, suspicious for no reason. So I busied myself. I vacuumed the upstairs hallway, wiped down the bathroom mirrors, even organized the Tupperware drawer. If you've ever tried to outclean your own anxiety, you know how that goes. Around 11:30, I realized Brian's car wasn't in the driveway. I'd been so wrapped up in chores that I hadn't noticed when he left. I peeked out from behind the living room curtain, no sign of his silver Honda Accord. Okay, maybe he went to Walgreens for medicine, I told myself. Or maybe he decided he needed some fresh air. He'd probably be back soon. I texted him, "Need anything from the store? How are you feeling?" No reply. I tried to ignore the tiny flicker of irritation. Maybe he was just napping, or his phone was on silent. I went back to folding laundry, sorting Ethan's superhero socks from Madison's unicorn ones. The TV murmured in the background, morning news giving way to talk shows I only half listened to. By noon, the rain had let up. I made myself a sandwich and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the backyard. Our Ring doorbell pinged, Amazon delivery. I waved to the driver and set the package on the counter. Still no word from Brian. My phone buzzed with a text from Heather. Lucas forgot his lunchbox again. Want to meet at Target later? I almost said yes, but something held me back. I needed to be home, just in case Brian needed me. Or maybe I just needed to see him, to reassure myself this was all nothing. It was almost 1:30 when Brian finally replied. "Sorry, was resting. I'm okay. Don't worry about me." Short, almost cold. I stared at the words, rereading them until they blurred. I thought about calling him, but I didn't. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to trust myself, but that feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I went upstairs, intending to put away the laundry, but instead, I found myself standing outside the guest room door, hand hovering over the doorknob. I listened. Silence. I knocked softly, then pushed the door open. The bed was made, perfectly neat, like he'd never even been there. That's when the first real chill ran through me. Why make the bed if you're still sick? Why go through the trouble? I checked the bathroom. His toothbrush was still damp, but his razor hadn't moved. No sign of the pajamas he usually wore when he wasn't feeling well. Everything was too tidy. I tried to shake it off. I went back downstairs and checked the family calendar on the fridge. Nothing out of the ordinary. Madison had soccer practice at 5. Ethan's reading log was due tomorrow, and Brian's work schedule was clear. No big meetings, no trips planned. Just a regular Thursday. I called Heather instead. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Did Lucas ever get his lunchbox?" She laughed. "Of course not. He's hopeless. What about you? How's Brian? Still under the weather?" "Yeah," I said. "He's resting. I think he's just stressed from work." Heather went quiet for a minute. "He seemed fine at the BBQ on Sunday. Maybe he just needs a break. You guys have been running non-stop lately." I agreed. but I could feel her hesitation, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Heather always knew when I was holding something back. We chatted for a few minutes, about the weather, about the next book club meeting, about Madison's science fair project. I tried to sound normal, but my mind kept drifting back to Brian, to the empty driveway, to the perfectly made bed. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, counting down the minutes until the kids would be home. I baked a batch of chocolate chip cookies, my go-to comfort food. The house filled with the smell of vanilla and melting chocolate, and for a little while, I let myself believe everything was fine. But beneath the surface, that gnawing doubt kept scratching at me. Why would Brian insist on staying in the guest room? Why didn't he want me to bring him soup or check on him? Why did he make the bed, leave without telling me, and act so distant? I didn't have any answers. Not yet. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about a sick day. Something was off. Something was brewing just beneath the surface of our perfectly ordinary life. When the kids came home, everything snapped back into routine. Backpacks dropped in the hallway, shoes kicked off, Madison begging for a cookie before homework, Ethan showing me a crumpled drawing he'd made in art class. I smiled, hugged them, tried to be present, but I kept glancing at the clock, waiting for Brian to come home, for the other shoe to drop. He didn't get back until after 6. The rain had stopped, leaving everything fresh and glistening under the streetlights. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the garage door rumbling open. I watched from the kitchen window as he grabbed his briefcase and walked slowly up the path, shoulders hunched against the chill. "Hey," I called as he came in. "How are you feeling?" He gave me a small smile, tired, but not sick. "Still a little off," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Just needed some air. Picked up some soup on the way home." I nodded, pretending not to notice the Panera bread bag in his hand. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But there was a knot in my stomach that wouldn't untangle. We ate dinner in front of the TV, the kids watching cartoons while Brian pushed his soup around the bowl. I watched him more closely than I ever had, searching for signs of the man I thought I knew. He laughed at something Ethan said, but it sounded hollow, rehearsed. That night after the kids were in bed, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring out at the quiet street, the glow of the porch light casting long shadows on the lawn. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. He was going to bed early, still not feeling great. I typed out a reply, "Hope you feel better," but didn't send it. Instead, I opened the family credit card app, almost without thinking. I scrolled through the transactions, my heart beating faster with every swipe. And that's when I saw it. A charge that made my blood run cold. But I still didn't know the worst part. My thumb hovered over that charge, my mind racing to make sense of it. The transaction was for $63.87 at a place called Bloom and Vine, a boutique florist in Frisco. Definitely not the kind of stop Brian would make on a day he claimed he could barely get out of bed. My heart pounded in my ears. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he'd ordered flowers for me? Our anniversary was still 3 months away, but maybe he wanted to cheer me up. Except, he'd never done that before. I closed my eyes, willing myself not to jump to conclusions, but the seed of doubt had already taken root, winding its way through every memory I had of him. I set my phone down and tried to quiet the noise in my head. The dishwasher beeped, snapping me back to reality. I busied myself unloading plates and glasses, hands moving on autopilot. Every clink of ceramic sounded sharper than usual, echoing in the silence of the house. I kept replaying the day, Brian's insistence on resting, his car missing from the driveway, the way he'd barely touched his soup. Suddenly, all those little moments didn't seem so harmless. The next morning, Plano was shrouded in a heavy gray drizzle. I woke up before my alarm, my mind restless. Brian was already in the guest room, the door closed. I listened for any sounds, coughing, sneezing, something to confirm his story. But all I heard was the steady hum of the rain against the windows. I went through my morning routine in a daze. packed Ethan and Lily's lunches, double-checked their backpacks, and loaded them into the SUV. The car ride was unusually quiet, the kids picking up on my distracted energy. At drop-off, I forced a smile for Mrs. Ellison, their teacher, and waved to another mom, but I felt like I was moving through fog. On the way home, I stopped at Starbucks for a venti pike and a blueberry muffin, hoping caffeine would clear my head. The barista, a chatty college kid, complimented my rain boots, but I barely registered it. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching the wipers swipe away beads of rain, and opened my phone again, staring at that Bloom and Vine charge. My fingers itched to call Brian, to demand an explanation, but I was afraid of what he might say. Instead, I scrolled through his recent text messages. Nothing out of the ordinary. No calls or texts to any numbers I didn't recognize. I tried to tell myself that was a good sign. Back at home, I tried to distract myself with chores. I folded laundry in the living room, the scent of fresh fabric softener filling the air, but my mind kept drifting back to that receipt. I checked the Ring doorbell history, half expecting to see Brian coming or going, but there was nothing unusual except a short window around midday when the camera seemed to have been offline. I chalked it up to the spotty Wi-Fi that sometimes cut out during storms, but even that felt suspicious now. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted Brian, "How are you feeling? Need anything?" His reply came minutes later. "Still tired. Just going to rest a bit more. Don't worry about me." I stared at the message, reading between the lines, searching for something. Anything that would make me feel better. But all I felt was distance. Heather stopped by that afternoon, her umbrella dripping on the porch as she let herself in. She was my anchor, the friend I could count on for honesty, whether I wanted it or not. She settled onto a bar stool at the kitchen island, peeling off her rain jacket. "Rough day?" she asked, eyeing my untouched coffee. I hesitated, then blurted out, "Brian's homesick, or at least he says he is." She raised an eyebrow. "He seemed fine at the block party on Saturday. Did he catch something from the kids?" I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Maybe. He's barricaded himself in the guest room. Says he doesn't want to get us sick." Heather sipped her coffee, studying me. "You okay, Amanda? You look tense." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Just tired. Too much on my plate, you know?" She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. We chatted about the upcoming PTA bake sale, the endless rain, and the new neighbors who'd just moved in on Oak Street. The ordinary details of suburban life, but I felt disconnected, like I was watching my own life from a distance. When Heather left, I found myself wandering the house, picking up toys, straightening cushions, anything to keep from thinking too much. But every silence felt heavier. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping for another text from Brian, something to reassure me. Instead, I got a notification from the family credit card, a new transaction at Target. I clicked it, relieved to see it was just my own purchase from yesterday, but the tension in my chest wouldn't go away. Around 2:30, I glanced outside and saw Brian's car pull into the driveway. My pulse quickened. I watched from the window as he sat in the car for a long moment, head bowed, before finally coming inside. He looked tired, but not sick. If anything, he looked nervous. "Hey," I called from the kitchen, keeping my tone light. "Hey," he replied, forcing a smile. "Just needed some fresh air. Went for a drive, stopped at Panera for some soup." I nodded, pretending to believe him. "Did it help?" He shrugged. "A little." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Brian retreated back to the guest room, claiming he needed to rest, and I busied myself prepping dinner and helping the kids with homework. I tried to act normal, but every interaction felt strained. At one point, Lily asked why Daddy was so quiet, and I just said he wasn't feeling well. That evening, as we all sat down for dinner, chicken casserole, Brian's favorite, I watched him closely. He barely ate, pushing food around his plate. Ethan chatted about his spelling bee, Lily recounted a story from art class, But Brian seemed distant, lost in thought. I wanted to scream at him, demand the truth, but instead I smiled and kept the conversation moving, terrified of shattering the fragile peace. After dinner, Brian excused himself early, saying he was exhausted. I watched him go, my heart aching with a mix of anger and fear. When the kids were finally in bed, I sat in the living room, the house eerily quiet except for the soft tick of the clock. I felt trapped, caught between wanting to believe my husband and the mounting evidence that something was terribly wrong. Unable to sit still, I pulled out my laptop and Googled Bloom and Vine Frisco. Their Instagram was filled with photos of elaborate arrangements, roses, peonies, lilies. Scrolling through their feed, something caught my eye. A post from the previous day, featuring a bouquet of white lilies and pink roses. The caption read, "Special delivery for a special someone. Just because." But what really made my stomach drop was the woman in the background, Rachel Thompson, one of the moms from Maple Elementary. She was smiling, holding the bouquet, her face partially obscured but unmistakable. I remembered her from the last PTA meeting, chatting animatedly with the other moms, and with Brian. I stared at the photo, a cold wave of realization washing over me. Was it a coincidence? Or was there more to this than I wanted to admit? I tried to remember every interaction I'd ever witnessed between Brian and Rachel. Had they ever seemed too friendly? I recalled how he'd laughed at her joke at the last school fundraiser, how she'd lingered a little longer than necessary when they spoke. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories that suddenly felt sinister. I wanted to call Heather, to spill everything, but I was scared. What if I was overreacting? What if I was wrong? But then again, what if I wasn't? The next day, the rain had stopped, but the air was thick with humidity. I dropped the kids at school and sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind spinning. I decided to talk to Heather. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was her. We met at Panera, the same one from Brian's receipt. As we sat in a booth near the window, I told her everything. Brian's sick day, the missing car, the florist charge, the Instagram photo. Heather listened, her expression shifting from concern to something harder to read. "Do you think he's—" She trailed off, not wanting to say the word. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "But I can't shake this feeling that something's off." Heather squeezed my hand. "You're not crazy. If it were me, I'd be suspicious too. But maybe there's an explanation. Maybe he was helping her with something?" I shook my head. "Why wouldn't he tell me? Why lie?" She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. As I drove home, I replayed the conversation over and over. Part of me wanted to believe Heather, that there was an innocent explanation. But the evidence kept piling up. Later that afternoon, as I was unloading groceries, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ask Brian where he really was yesterday." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. Who would send something like that? Was it a prank? Or someone trying to warn me? I glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed, like the walls of my suburban life were closing in. I checked the Ring app again, scrolling through the footage. That same gap in the timeline glared back at me, a 2-hour window with no recordings. It was as if the house itself was hiding something from me. When Brian came home that evening, I watched him with new eyes. Every gesture, every word seemed calculated. He smiled at the kids, asked about their day, even offered to help with dishes, something he rarely did. But the more normal he acted, the more certain I became that something was wrong. After the kids were in bed, I confronted him. Gently, at first. I asked how he was feeling, if he needed anything, if there was anything he wanted to talk about. He just shook his head, eyes fixed on the TV. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to force the truth out of him. But I was scared. Scared of what he might say. Scared of what it would mean for our family. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail of the past few days. The rain tapped softly against the window, a lullaby for my anxiety. When I finally drifted off, it was to dreams of white lilies and unanswered questions. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, Ethan wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, can I tell you something?" he asked, his voice sleepy. "Of course, honey. What's up?" "I saw Daddy's car at Lily's friend's house yesterday, when we drove by on the way to soccer practice." I waved, but he didn't see me. My heart stopped. Lily's best friend was Rachel's daughter. That couldn't be a coincidence. I knelt down, forcing a smile. "Are you sure, sweetie? Maybe it was someone else's car?" He nodded. "No, it was Daddy's. I saw the sticker on the back window." I hugged him, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was spinning, the pieces clicking together in a way I didn't want to accept. As I packed the kids' lunches, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the blocked number. "He's lying to you. You deserve better." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. The walls felt like they were closing in, every familiar detail of my life suddenly foreign. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. I wanted to trust my husband, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the truth was closing in, no matter how hard I tried to outrun it. I stood in the kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the window, and realized my world was about to change forever. Because when I thought I'd uncovered everything, my phone buzzed with a message that shattered what little trust I had left. What happened next flipped my entire world upside down. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped my phone. I stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at the message on the screen. "He's lying to you. You deserve better." The words searing into my mind. For a moment, I just let the quiet fill the room, trying to steady my breath, feeling the world tilt beneath my feet. The hum of the dishwasher, the distant sound of a lawnmower across Maple Avenue, the kids' laughter drifting from the backyard. All of it felt surreal, as if I'd stepped into someone else's life. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, erase the message, erase the entire day. Instead, I forced myself to move, going through the motions of folding laundry, scrubbing the kitchen counters, anything to keep my mind occupied. But every ordinary task felt like a lie, every corner of our house now hiding secrets. I kept glancing at the clock, counting down the minutes until Brian was supposed to be home. My stomach was in knots. I tried texting him, "How are you feeling? Need anything?" He replied after a few minutes, "Still resting. Maybe some ginger ale later. Don't worry about me." The words sounded like him, but I read them over and over, searching for something beneath the surface. My mind ran wild with possibilities. Was he still lying? Where was he really? And who was sending me these messages? I called Heather, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can you come over?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but she heard the strain. "I'll be there in 10, she replied, no questions asked. I paced the living room, straightening throw pillows that didn't need straightening, watching the rain beat against the windows. When Heather knocked, I let her in without a word. She took one look at my face and put her arms around me. The tears I'd been holding back spilled over. I told her about the messages, the receipts, the florist, the gap in the Ring camera footage, the charge at Panera Bread. Heather listened quietly, rubbing my back, her face growing more serious with every detail. "You need to talk to him," she said finally. "But get your facts straight first. Make sure you know what you're dealing with." I nodded, wiping my eyes, feeling both desperate and strangely determined. I thanked her for coming, and as she left, she squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think, Amanda." After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, the house suddenly too quiet. I opened my laptop and started piecing things together, pulling up the credit card statements, cross-referencing times and places. I scrolled through my phone, looking for anything I'd missed, a text, a call, a photo that might explain away the doubts. But the more I looked, the more the threads unraveled. There was another florist charge from 2 weeks ago, a lunch at a wine bar in Frisco the same day Brian said he was working late, a sudden burst of Venmo payments to someone listed only as RT. My heart hammered in my chest as I realized what the initials meant. Rachel Thompson. I remembered seeing her at the last PTA meeting, her bright smile, her easy laugh. I'd always thought she was friendly, maybe a bit too friendly with the dads, but nothing more. Now every memory felt poisoned. I thought back to Brian's odd compliments, the way he mentioned her great recommendations for books and restaurants. Had he been hiding in plain sight all along? I scrolled through Facebook, searching Rachel's profile. Her posts were all school events, selfies with her son, PTA fundraisers. But I noticed a photo from the week before, a bouquet of lilies on her kitchen table, tagged at the same florist Brian had visited. The caption read, "Some days you just need a little brightness." My vision blurred. Brian was allergic to lilies. He never would have bought them for me. But for Rachel, he did. The thought made me physically sick. The house felt colder, emptier. I looked at our wedding photo on the mantel, the smiles that once meant everything. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted there to be another explanation. But the facts lined up like dominoes, one after another, impossible to ignore. I checked the Ring camera again, scrolling through the logs. The gap was still there, 3 hours missing. I wondered if Brian had thought I'd never notice. I wondered what else I'd missed, distracted by soccer practice and bake sales and keeping up appearances. Just as I was about to close my laptop, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the blocked number. Ask him about Wednesday, too. My blood ran cold. What was I missing? I scrolled back through my calendar. Wednesday was book club night. I'd been out with the girls, laughing over Chardonnay and gossiping about the latest drama. Brian had stayed home with the kids, or so I thought. I checked the Ring camera for Wednesday. There it was, at 7:42 p.m., the front door opening, Brian stepping out, looking over his shoulder before shutting the door quietly behind him. He was gone for almost an hour. When he returned, he was carrying a bag from Trader Joe's. He'd told me he'd just run to pick up snacks for the kids, but the timestamp didn't match the store's closing time. I called Trader Joe's, pretending to look for a lost receipt. They confirmed they closed at 8 p.m. that night. Brian would have barely made it, but the camera showed him returning at 8:40. The pit in my stomach grew. I pressed my palms to my temples, trying to make sense of it all. I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare. The kids came in, wanting dinner. I forced a smile, went through the motions, asking about school and homework and who got picked for line leader. I tucked them in that night, reading the same bedtime stories, kissing their foreheads, all while my mind raced with questions I wasn't ready to answer. After they were asleep, I sat in the dark, the only light coming from my phone. I scrolled through old texts between Brian and me, searching for the moment things changed. When had he started lying? Was it something I did? Was it something I missed? I heard the garage door open. Brian was finally home. I wiped my face, squared my shoulders, and went to meet him. He looked tired, eyes shadowed, hair mussed from the rain. "Hey," he said, setting his bag down. "Sorry I'm late. I just needed some air." I nodded, watching him carefully. "Did you get everything you needed?" He hesitated. "Yeah, just some ginger ale. I'll be fine." We barely spoke through dinner. The silence between us was thick. Every word weighted. I kept waiting for him to say something, to confess, to explain, to offer anything that would make sense of the chaos in my head. But he just scrolled through his phone, answered a few work emails, and retreated to the guest room early, claiming he didn't want to get anyone sick. That night, I lay awake, listening to the rain tap against the windows, replaying every conversation, every detail. I realized I couldn't avoid the truth any longer. I had to confront him, but I needed to be smart. I needed proof. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school, my mind spinning. I drove to Starbucks, ordered my usual latte, and sat in my car, staring at the florist's Instagram page. I noticed something I'd missed before, a photo of Rachel with a man's back turned, barely visible, but the jacket looked exactly like Brian's. I zoomed in, my heart hammering. I couldn't be sure, but every instinct screamed at me. I called Heather again, my voice shaking. "Can you come with me?" I asked. "I need to talk to someone. I need to see something for myself." She didn't ask questions. We drove together to Maple Elementary, waited until drop-off was over, and then headed to Rachel's house. My heart was in my throat the whole time. Rachel answered the door, surprised to see us. "Amanda? Is everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just wanted to drop off the PTA forms. I figured you'd be busy." She invited us in, her house immaculate, the scent of fresh lilies filling the air. I glanced around, looking for any sign of Brian, any clue that would confirm my worst fears. There was nothing obvious, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rachel chatted about the school fundraiser, her son's soccer game, the usual small talk. I watched her closely, searching her face for any flicker of guilt. She was good. Almost too good. But when I mentioned Brian's sick day, she hesitated, just for a split second, before recovering. "Oh, I hope he's feeling better," she said, her voice just a little too bright. Heather shot me a look. We finished our visit quickly and left. As soon as we were in the car, I let out a shaky breath. "She knows something," I whispered. Heather nodded. "You need to talk to Brian. Tonight." The rest of the day crawled by. I picked up the kids, made dinner, tried to pretend everything was normal. My hands shook as I set the table. I watched the clock, counting down the minutes until Brian would be home. When he walked in, I was ready. I waited until the kids were watching TV, then called him into the kitchen. My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. "I need to ask you something," I said. He looked wary. "What's up?" I laid out the receipts, the florist charges, the Ring camera logs, the messages from the blocked number. I showed him the photos, the timeline, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. He stared at the table, silent for a long time. Then he looked up, his face pale. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt my anger rising. "Then what is it, Brian? Because it sure looks like you've been lying to me. About everything." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "Rachel and we've been talking. Just talking. I swear. I was stressed about work, about us, and she listened. That's all." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "That's all? You spent your sick day at her house. You bought her flowers. You disabled the security camera. You lied to me, Brian. Over and over." He looked away, guilt etched across his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. Rachel was easy to talk to. She understood." The words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him hurt the way I was hurting. Instead, I took a shaky breath. "I deserve better than this," I said, my voice trembling but firm. He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I know." The truth hung between us, heavy and undeniable. The life I thought I had was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. I left him standing in the kitchen, the evidence of his betrayal spread across the table. I walked upstairs, shut the door, and let myself finally break. But even as I cried, I knew one thing for certain. My world would never be the same. And what happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. I don't remember how long I stayed upstairs. Minutes, hours. It all blurred together. The sound of the rain against the window mixing with the dull ache in my chest. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything Brian had said, replaying every conversation, every laugh, every "I love you" we'd shared over the years, and wondering which ones had been real and which were just habit. Eventually, I heard the steady tread of Brian's footsteps on the stairs, then pause outside our bedroom door. He didn't knock. For a long time, he just stood there, as if unsure whether to come in or leave for good. When he finally spoke, his voice was muffled, thick with regret. "Amanda, I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. I want you to have space." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I needed air. I needed quiet. I needed anything but more words. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me. For a wild second, I thought it might be Rachel, reaching out to apologize or explain, but it was Heather. Just a simple text. "I'm here if you need anything." Seriously, anything. I blinked back tears, grateful for her, for this tiny lifeline in the middle of a storm I never saw coming. The next morning was the hardest of my life. The house felt cold and unfamiliar, like I'd woken up in someone else's story. I could hear Brian in the kitchen, moving quietly, pouring cereal for the kids, trying too hard to act normal. I lay still, listening to the little voices downstairs, the clink of spoons against bowls, the forced cheerfulness in Brian's voice as he asked if they wanted more milk or if they'd seen their library books. I finally dragged myself up and into the bathroom. My reflection looked like a stranger, puffy eyes, blotchy cheeks, hair still tangled from sleep. I splashed water on my face and forced myself to breathe. I had to pull it together, at least for the kids. They didn't deserve any of this. When I walked into the kitchen, Brian looked up, eyes rimmed red, his whole demeanor careful and small. The kids were halfway through their cereal, oblivious to the earthquake that had shaken their parents' world apart. "Morning, Mommy," Lily chirped, mouth full of Cheerios. I managed to smile, kissed the top of her head, and tried to steady my voice. "Good morning, sweetie." Brian cleared his throat. I'll take them to school today, if that's okay." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He collected backpacks, zipped up coats, and shepherded them out the door, pausing only once to look at me before he left. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles hurt. The house was too quiet after they left. I wandered through the rooms like a ghost, picking up stray socks, smoothing out the throw on the couch, wiping crumbs from the counter. Every mundane task felt surreal, as if I was acting out some other woman's life. My phone dinged again, another message from Heather. "Do you want coffee? I can come by. Or I can just sit in the driveway with you in silence. Whatever you need." I typed back, "Coffee, please." She arrived 20 minutes later, still in her leggings and oversized college sweatshirt, holding 2 steaming cups from Starbucks. I met her on the porch, the air brisk and damp, and for a moment we just hugged, neither of us saying a word. When we finally sat on the porch swing, I tried to explain, but the words came out in a rush, jagged and raw, tumbling over each other. Heather listened, her face a mask of concern and fury. "He actually admitted it?" she asked softly. I nodded, choking back tears. "He said it wasn't physical, that he just needed someone to talk to. But I don't know if I believe him. I don't know anything anymore." Heather squeezed my hand. "You believe what your gut tells you, Amanda, and you protect yourself. You don't owe him anything." A silence settled between us, but it was companionable, not awkward. We watched the clouds drift overhead, a thin shaft of sunlight struggling through. I sipped my coffee, the warmth a small comfort. The next few days passed in a haze. Brian stayed in the guest room, barely speaking to me except about the kids. We tiptoed around each other, careful and brittle, both waiting for the other to shatter. At night, I lay awake replaying the last few months. Rachel's easy laughter at school events, the way Brian had seemed distracted at home, the flare of guilt I'd ignored every time he stayed late at work. I started making lists in my head, things I needed to do if this really was the end. Find a lawyer, call my mom, open a separate bank account, make a plan for the kids. The idea of divorce was terrifying, but the idea of staying in this limbo, never knowing what was true, was worse. 3 days after the confrontation, Brian asked if we could talk. The kids were at a play date, the house blessedly quiet. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes fixed on the wood grain. "I want to be honest," he said. "I owe you that much." I braced myself, heart pounding. He took a long breath. "It started about 6 months ago. Rachel and we ran into each other at a school fundraiser. She was struggling with her ex, and I guess I connected with her." She listened. I felt seen. He winced, as if the words tasted bitter in his mouth. We started texting, then meeting up for coffee. It was emotional, but I swear, Amanda, it never got physical. I thought I could handle it. I thought it would help me figure out my own feelings, but I just made everything worse. I stared at him, searching his face for signs of deceit, but all I saw was exhaustion and regret. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I whispered. He shrugged helplessly. "I tried. I felt like we were on autopilot. The house, the kids, work, it was all just routine. I didn't know how to break through. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I wanted to scream, to rage at him for breaking something I'd worked so hard to protect. But instead, I felt numb. I stared down at my hands, at the wedding ring that suddenly felt heavy and foreign. "I'm going to need some time," I said finally. "A lot of time. I don't know what I want right now, but I can't keep living like this." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'll give you all the time you need." That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the living room, the TV on mute, scrolling mindlessly through old photos on my phone. Family vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings. Each image felt like a snapshot of a life that no longer existed. I wondered if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been too caught up in the daily grind to notice my marriage slipping away. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Lisa Carter, recommended by another mom from the PTA who'd survived her own messy divorce last year. Lisa was calm, direct, and kind. She explained my options: separation, mediation, custody arrangements. We talked about finances, about the house, about what would be best for Lily and Ethan. I hung up feeling both terrified and oddly empowered. For the first time in days, I felt like I had a sliver of control. Later that day, I told Brian I wanted a trial separation. He didn't argue, just nodded, silent, defeated. We agreed he would stay with a friend for a while, and that we would keep things as normal as possible for the kids. Explaining everything to Lily and Ethan was the hardest conversation I've ever had. We sat on the couch side by side and told them that Daddy would be staying somewhere else for a little while, but that we both loved them very much and nothing would ever change that. Lily cried. Ethan just looked confused, asking if this meant we wouldn't have Friday movie nights anymore. I hugged them both until my arms ached, promising I would never let them down. The days that followed were a blur of logistics, texting Brian about visitation schedules, updating my parents, fielding questions from neighbors who'd noticed his car missing from the driveway. Somehow, word got around. Plano may be a big suburb, but news travels fast, especially when it comes to drama in the Johnson house. I caught glimpses of pity in the eyes of moms at school drop-off, overheard whispers at the grocery store. It stung, but I refused to let it define me. Heather came over with takeout and wine one night, and we sat on my back porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill. "You're stronger than you think," she told me. "You always have been." I wasn't sure I believed her, not yet, but I wanted to. A week after Brian left, I found myself standing in the middle of the kitchen, sunlight slanting through the windows, a sense of calm settling over me for the first time since that awful day. The house was still messy, dinner still needed to be made, the kids still needed their lunches packed, but I realized I could do it. I could build something new out of the wreckage. Then, just as I was starting to feel steady, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "Amanda?" The voice was quiet, hesitant. It took me a second to place it. Rachel. My stomach twisted. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I wanted to apologize. I never meant to hurt you. I swear I didn't realize how far things had gone until it was too late. Brian needed someone to talk to, and I was lonely, and I'm sorry. Truly. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to hang up, to yell, to demand answers, but all I managed was, "Please don't contact me again." She was silent for a moment. "I understand. I'm sorry, Amanda. I really am." I hung up, hands shaking. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the phone, letting the anger and sadness and relief wash over me. It was over. Finally, it was over. That night, as I tucked Lily and Ethan into bed, I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't defined by Brian's choices, or Rachel's betrayal, or the whispers of my neighbors. I was still me, Amanda Johnson, mother, daughter, friend. I'd survived something I never thought I could, and I was still standing. I lay in bed, listening to the quiet hum of the house, and promised myself that whatever came next, I would face it head on. I would fight for my happiness, for my kids, for a life that was honest and real. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that my story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined.